you very much, Molly. I am happy to introduce our two panelists for tonight. Bella Neyman is an independent curator and writer specializing in contemporary art, jewelry, and design. From 2014 to 2018, she was the director of the gallery at Rhinestein Ross, a New York-based gallery specializing in contemporary jewelry. In 2014, Bella co-founded Platforma, a curatorial initiative focused on exhibiting contemporary jewelry, and since then, Platforma has staged important exhibitions in the United States and in Europe. Bella is also the co-founder of New York City Jewelry Week, a citywide celebration of jewelry, and she has served on the board of the Art Jewelry Forum since 2013. Bella is a freelance journalist whose articles on decorative arts, fashion, and jewelry have appeared in the New York Times, Modern Magazine, Metalsmith, American Craft, and the magazine Antiques, among others. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and daughter. Welcome, Bella. And moving on to Dr. Emily Stoehrer, who is a curator, author, and lecturer who works at the intersection of jewelry, fashion, and design. As the Rita J. Kaplan and Susan B. Kaplan Curator of Jewelry at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, she oversees a collection that spans 6,000 years and includes more than 22,000 objects. Highlights include ancient jewelry, a growing collection of 19th and 20th century jewelry, and the Daphne Farago collection of contemporary jewelry. In addition to her work as a curator, Emily has spent more than a decade as an adjunct professor at Boston area colleges, and for 4 years managed 3 undergraduate programs in fashion design and merchandising. Most recently, Emily developed a history of jewelry course for the art history department at Massachusetts College of Arts and Design. Emily holds a PhD in humanities from Salve Regina University, a Master of Arts in Fashion and Textile Studies from the Fashion Institute of Technology, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I'm extending a very warm welcome to both Bella and Emily. This is going to be an exciting and very fun evening. I'm now turning the microphone over to our guests, and I'm starting with the first slide.
Thank you both very much for those very kind introductions. If there's background noise here, it's because my kids are upstairs screaming, so I apologize for that. It's our pleasure to be here today. Bella and I are good friends, and this is the first chance we've ever had to do a presentation together. So we tried our best to pick 10 pairs of earrings from the MFA, but I think we landed on 11. And there's some comparables in there too that will give you a few more than 11, because I'm sure you're all hungry for more than that. To give you some sense of the scope of the MFA's jewelry collection, Brigitte mentioned that we have 22,000 objects of jewelry at the MFA. And I think if you search the website, you come up with a little over 800 of objects or earrings. And in many cases, the earrings make up 2 records. So we don't have a whole lot of earrings in the collection, but the examples that we do have are really extraordinary. We've picked quite a range to share with you tonight. So unless Bella has something to add for introduction, I think we can go to the first slide.
I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased to be here. And I feel like the MFA Boston is my, even though I'm here in New York, I visit it virtually more than I do any other museum because of your great collection. And most of it is available online. So it's really such a great opportunity for scholars and writers and enthusiasts to really be familiar with what is in the museum's collection, especially the jewelry, of course. So anyway, I'm really excited to be here. And I hope the audience is really pleased with our choices because it was fun, putting them together. So yeah, that's it. We can start.
So we started with this slide, which isn't one of our top 10, but it's 2 examples of jewelry from Boston. And we did this just to lay some groundwork for jewelry design in Boston. And of course, for those of you that are here locally, you know that when the museum closed, there was an exhibition up called Boston Made, Arts and Crafts, Jewelry and Metalwork, that explored the Society of Arts and Crafts origins and some of the earliest jewelers who were part of that. Among them, Frank Gardner Hale, whose work you see here on the left, whose archive we had acquired at the museum back in 2014. And this exhibition was a celebration of that archive and of all the information we were able to learn about Hale and his contemporaries. We didn't find a whole lot of earrings in that research, but we did find one pair by him. But one of the most interesting things I think about that research was a comment that he made saying how much he detested earrings because he felt like earrings were the one thing that you had to deform your body in order to wear. So he eventually gave into it. He kind of took that back and realized there was a craze for earrings that was, that he was going to have to get on board with. And here you can see one of his designs on the left. And then fast forward nearly 100 years and you see these earrings by Mie Matsukata, who was one of the founding members of Atelier Janier in Boston. And so we do have these extraordinary examples, on either side of the spectrum of jewelry earrings made in Boston.
So I have a question about this. So this drawing for the Frank Gardner Hale, so I see that it's from the Washington, D.C. So he was staying at a hotel. Is that it when he was sketching this? So do you think this was for a client of his? Like, why do you think he was sort of sketching out these earrings? Is it something that we know?
I think you're absolutely right. So just like jewelers today do trunk shows, he did trunk shows all over the United States. And so I think, he met with a client, probably maybe got some gems from that client or, got some feedback on what the client wanted and was here sketching something for them. And so in the archive, we do have, more kind of finished drawings, but then also these types of sketches that are on all sorts of scraps of paper and whatnot.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see that design process. And the Mie Matsukata, of course, I've long loved her work. And, it's interesting because she attended the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and she traveled quite a bit. And so these earrings so Janier, which is the company and the store that she opened it in the early 50s. And I tell myself that next time I come to Boston, I'm going to walk down Boylston Street and try to find the exact location of where Janier was. But these are a bit sort of later for her. And they're also a move away from she was known for this very sort of modernist look. And so here, I think, because of her travels, I think around this time she went to Egypt and Greece. Because of her travels, these earrings are quite different from what else, she did. And, I can't wait to see them in person. Hopefully, I don't know how often these are on view, but they've always been a favorite of mine.
There's not enough jewelry on view, but someday we'll all be back at the museum and we can do these behind the scenes visits, which if life was what it normally is, we'd be there in the study room looking at these up close together. Yeah.
And I would totally wear these.
We can move to the next slide, Brigitte. So we organize these chronologically. So we're going to start with single earring, which is one of our most famous earrings in the MFA collection. This is called the Nike earring. And this is the Winged Victory driving a chariot. And it's extraordinary. Bella encouraged me when we were putting these slides together to put the size. So I have the size for each of the earrings here. And this one is about 2 inches. And it's made up of 100 individual pieces that have been soldered together. It's likely that this was made possibly for a high-ranking person or for a statue, perhaps. It's this amazing work of art that has captivated people for such a long time at the museum. It was featured in a documentary or an episode of a PBS show on different examples of art from the MFA back in the 1960s. And afterwards, someone became so captivated by it that it was actually stolen from the MFA. And if Brigitte advances to the next slide, you'll see this clipping from a Boston newspaper. It was stolen on September 7th, 1963. And the person who had stolen it later had mental health episode, ended up in McLean's Hospital outside of Boston, and had explained, you know, that he had taken it and explained where he had buried it in the Fenway, just outside of the MFA. And so there were MFA staff out around the museum with metal detectors looking, trying to find this earring. And you can see it here on the right as it was reinstalled after it was found. It was recovered April 16th, 7 months later, 1964. You can see the woman here on the right, the woman who found it, with the soup can that it was buried inside, which luckily prevented it from being damaged almost at all. And so it was rehung in the galleries along with that, which is just kind of a funny story that nobody really knows. But I think with the Gardner documentary being on everybody's mind, I think it's interesting to think about these works of art and these stories that we, you know, don't know about, don't hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of, when Emily was telling me the story, I said, well, it's kind of like, you know, the Mona Lisa when it was stolen after being on exhibit. But I also love that it was on display with the actual, like, you know, can that it was found in, you know, it's just, it's wild and bizarre. How heavy is that earring though, do you think?
I actually have never handled it, but I imagine it's quite heavy.
Yeah.
It's so large.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm asking, just because it seems like it's, you know, talk about statement earrings.
Years ago, there was a small short documentary made about the piece and the robbery. And the woman who found it was interviewed as part of that because she was so captivated by it as well. It was one of her favorite objects in the MFA's collection.
Incredible. Yeah, simply incredible. What a story.
So we can go ahead to the next. So this was one that Bella chose to have in here because she felt like it was so modern. Do you want to talk about it for a minute?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you know, just when I was going through the collection, the earplug really stood out to me because it reminded me of sort of body modification and earlobe stretching, and because it seems like such a, you know, modern piece of jewelry. And of course, you know, it's from, you know, 270 BC, you know, but I just thought it's incredible and how today, you know, we don't always think about the references, right, or where sort of styles originated from. But also then you told me about this excavation that the MFA did, which I had no idea about.
Yeah, so the picture on the right is one of the excavations that the MFA did. The MFA started excavating in the Nile Valley and in the South Sudan in the late 19th century, and those excavations continued up until World War II. And so we have an incredible collection of Nubian jewelry that was featured in an exhibition in 2014. And it's now a larger exhibition of Nubian art is on tour. I think that Bella, you looked and saw that this earring is now in St. Louis, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. Isn't that crazy?
We split what we found during those excavations with the Sudanese government, and so half of the collection is in Khartoum and half is at the MFA. And for most of the earrings that were found, it's really interesting. It meant that one came to the MFA and one stayed behind. And so I think in this case, either we have a pair or we have two very similar earrings, but in all the other earring examples that we had in that exhibition, there was only one single earring. And that was because we don't have pairs of earrings of these Nubian jewels.
Wow. How exciting though. Yeah, and I love this period, that photo too.
So we're fast forwarding quite a bit here and jumping to the 1860s, but a lot of what we're going to show you is 19th and 20th century because that's really the strength of the MFA's collection. These earrings, as you can see from the title, belong to Mary Todd Lincoln. And she bought these probably around 1860, maybe 1862 or so. It's thought that these earrings were bought for late mourning. If you think about mourning dress of the 19th century, you know, you had to wear black for a certain period of time. Now, for those of you that are doing the math in your head, you realize this is before Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And that's true. She had lost a son in 1862, her son William, who she called Willie. And she was a well-known shopaholic. And so she was often shopping and buying. And she bought these, it's likely that she bought these at a department store in DC called Galt's in the 1860s, around the time that her son might have died. These are probably late morning earrings. They have this black tracery enamel around the gold and diamonds that would have made them appropriate to wear towards the end of the mourning period. She was shopping all the time. And when you're first lady and you're shopping, you're not always asked to pay your bills on time, but that changes when you're not first lady anymore. And if you advance the slide, you see that after Abraham Lincoln's death, which was in 1865, in 1867, by then she had been called upon for about $6,000 worth of debts. She didn't have the money to pay for those bills. And so she was forced to sell many of her possessions, this jewelry among them. And if you look at the bottom right corner of that newspaper clipping, you see this jewelry in its original box. This is just a few years after she likely purchased it. So basically new at that point, being sold in what became known as the old clothes scandal, because it was thought to be so sordid, was the word that was used, that the first lady would have to sell some of her possessions in order to pay off these bills, that things didn't sell. Yeah. And which was very unfortunate because she needed them to pay this debt that she owed.
It's so crazy to me because I feel like in this day and age, if a first lady was auctioning off her jewels, I mean, I think of like, you know, Jackie Kennedy Onassis, for example, it would be just it wouldn't be deemed as inappropriate. It would just, you know, every jewelry collector would want to get these pieces, but she was really kind of, you know, the press really was really against it, and the sale didn't do so well. Is that right?
That's right.
But I also, you know, it's funny because when I first saw them in the museum's collection, for some reason I thought, wait, did she design those? Like I didn't realize that she had bought them. And I also didn't know that she was such a shopaholic. I kind of just found that to be just like a very funny thing.
But bought these for herself. You know, we talk about that so much with 20th century women, like buying things for themselves, but, you know, great, you know, good for her to be shopping and buying her own jewelry in the 19th century.
Yeah. Self-purchasing, of course. Yeah. No, they're quite, I mean, and they're beautiful earrings. And you know, it's too bad she had to part with them.
I know, it's a really sad story.
So these hummingbird earrings are incredible. And I'm always one of those people that it's very hard for me to see a piece of jewelry that I'm repulsed by. And I know that when it comes to, you know, sort of hummingbird heads, which were very popular in the Victorian era, I know some people sort of feel very uncomfortable. But these are incredible, and they're so beautifully preserved. And I just, you know, again, like I just thought, oh my God, like who would have worn them? First of all, I always think about that, like who is supposed to be wearing these pieces? But they're just, but to also have a matching brooch, like it's so rare, I think.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that they survive. These are taxidermied hummingbird heads, and the picture really doesn't do them justice for two reasons. You can't really fully see the angle of the head, but also you can't appreciate the iridescence of the feathers, which is just extraordinary. But when you see them in person, they change color. You know, the top of the heads have these like little mohawks with this reddish color hair on top. This is, you know, Victoriana kind of at its best. This is, you know, this is also an example of mourning jewelry. There was a fascination with the creatures themselves and the way that they kind of float suspended in the air and transcend time in that way. And so they were thought to be, in that way, symbols of mourning. This animal that could kind of live between, you know, the present and the past somehow.
And now, do we know with a pair of earrings like this, like, do we know who the maker was, or is it sort of less important in this particular instance?
I would love to know who the maker is. It's always important, but I don't know. You know, and that's kind of an evolving story for so many of the pieces in the MFA's collection. I don't believe that these are marked, but in some cases we have lots of jewelry that is marked that we haven't identified yet as well. So maybe at some point we'll figure out who made these, but I don't know.
And is conservation something, you know, because it's taxidermy, is conservation something that, you know, you guys would consider when acquiring a piece like this? When I say you guys, I mean, you know, the curatorial team and
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember I remember going in and picking these up with Yvonne, who was my predecessor years ago, but I don't remember the conversation around conservation, but yes, I would imagine that the conservators are kind of freaked out by this in the collection. You know, everything's stored in a way that will allow things to survive as long as they possibly can in the best possible conditions. But yeah, these are an unusual one for us.
yeah, super beautiful. And I'm a huge fan of a huge fan of earrings like this, actually.
Emily and Bella, before we get too much further or move on to the next, we did have a question about the Mary Todd Lincoln earrings that we saw earlier. Just wanting a little bit more clarification on the materials used in those.
Yeah, Brigitte, if you want to go back for a second, I can explain the materials a little bit more. So these are small. They're about 1 inch square, and they're gold with diamonds, and they have black tracery enamel around the different elements. There we go. So here you have the earrings. On the next slide, there was an earrings and a brooch together, but those are diamonds and gold with the enamel, the black element that you see there. Yeah, thank you. I'll make sure I explain the materials before we start.
Excellent. Thanks for that.
No problem. This next pair is one of my favorites in the collection. I included them in the exhibition Past is Present Revival Jewelry. When people asked me what my favorite object in that exhibition was, I would often point to these, and they're just these tiny little things that I think are so easy to overlook in an exhibition or in a collection, but they're so extraordinary. And again, I'm going to tell you, you can't really appreciate them on the slide because you can't. You have to get up close and see that each of those cherub's curls is an individual gold granule. This is an incredible feat of granulation that was done by an artist named Melillo, who's an artist whose name you likely don't know, but he had worked for Castellani, who maybe you do know. Castellani was a Roman jeweler who was known for their Etruscan revival jewelry, and they were located right across from the Trevi Fountain in Rome. And so for many people, they were part of the Grand Tour. And Melillo ran the Naples operation of Castellani, and then went on to run their business down there after Alessandro Castellani returned to Rome in the 1870s. So Melillo was one of Alessandro Castellani's star pupils, and Alessandro Castellani had been part of many of the excavations that were happening in Tuscany outside of Rome. And so he had a chance to see and handle ancient gold work and to see ancient granulation, and he became fascinated and obsessed even with it and sought to reproduce it and figure out how he could do it as well as the ancients did. And so here you can think of him passing that on to Melillo and then creating this incredible pair of earrings, which have been in our collection for a long time. They started out in the ancient collection. They were thought to be like a copy, you know, just not a big deal, just a copy of an ancient piece. And kind of disregarded until later when Yvonne Markowitz found them and realized what they were. They were these great example of revival jewelry, the jewelry in the 19th century that was looking at ancient jewelry. And these I want to say these came into the collection like in the early 20th century. And then in 2009, we were given the brooch that goes along with them. So we have a brooch and a pair of earrings here that go together, which was an extraordinary match to put back together again many, many years later.
So I guess it's quite a testament to Melillo's craftsmanship, the fact that they were assumed to be, you know, like from the Etruscan period, because he was able to really get the granulation, that technique just right. Because I know for many jewelers, it is, you know, especially in the 20th century, there's always been this, you know, level of mastery and making sure that the granulation technique that they were executing in their own designs were very much in keeping with the Etruscan technique. So the fact that these were considered to be a copy just really goes to show you how well executed they are. So I'm noticing that, is that a little stone where the eyes should be, or is that hollow?
It's hollow. Yeah, I know it is.
Oh my God.
It's moving in the picture. They're hollow.
Incredible. And so you mentioned that this is something that someone would have picked up on the Grand Tour.
I think so. It's the type of thing someone might have purchased.
Yeah, like a souvenir.
Yeah, exactly. So much of the Grand Tour jewelry is, you can think of that way. You know, it speaks to your travels in Rome or in Naples or wherever your trip took you.
Very different from the souvenirs that I bring back from my travels. Yes. Okay, they're stunning. So this, you know, we went back and forth with these because they're actually hair pendants. And we thought, well, first of all, like, I'm glad that you're showing this photograph here as well, because you can really see how, you know, they're meant to be worn. But also, you know, first of all, the scale of these is quite unusual, and they're, you know, they're so beautifully executed. But this idea of pendants for the hair, I mean, what is that all about?
Yeah, so we actually have 2 pairs of these earrings in the collection. And these are what we would call like a type of jewelry. You know, they're a traditional type of hair ornament that's worn in Tibet. They're typically worn, you know, either in the hair or hooked into a wig. They have like these 2 hooks on the back. And I feel like you really have to see the picture, like you see here on the right, to fully understand how they're worn, because the back mechanism is a little bit confusing. And then what they're supposed to look like. And they are intended to look like earrings, even though they're not. They're, you know, hair ornaments. Although I think, you know, in this case, hair ornaments that are meant to look like earrings. And they're turquoise. They're in the shape of lotus blossoms, and I just think they're stunning, and they're enormous, and they have this great visual impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is the metal that they're?
Silver. It's just been so heavily oxidized that it's black.
Okay. Yeah, and really, actually, quite a beautiful contrast with the turquoise. But yeah, having the visuals of how they're meant to be worn, I think, is really important. And that's interesting too, when you look at museum collections, sometimes, you know, it's hard to know, right? I mean, how were these pieces meant to be worn? How were they meant to be, you know, on the body, of course. So it's really wonderful that the museum has an archive like this. And
sometimes it's a work in progress. You know, we might think we know how something was worn, and we do some more research and we don't quite know.
Yeah.
There's part of that with the next slide if we go forward. And I didn't change the date here, Bella, but this picture on the right is Catherine Deneuve wearing these Man Ray earrings. Oh, I didn't put the date. That's good.
Yeah.
The picture is from 1966. And on the left, you see these incredible Man Ray earrings, pendants pending, they're called, which have always been dated 1970. They're one of 12 pairs. So Bella and I were talking yesterday about, like, what's going on here? There's lots of documentation saying these were made in 1970. So how did Catherine Deneuve get her hands on a pair 4 years earlier?
Yeah, so I've been obsessed with these earrings for quite a long time, and I recently was teaching, or I am teaching, a class on artist jewelry, and so I showed these to my class, and I've been reading a lot about Giancarlo Montebello, who had Gem Montebello, which was in the 60s and 70s one of the main producers of artist jewelry, and so Giancarlo Montebello writes about meeting Man Ray in the spring of 1970, and this meeting was just really kind of groundbreaking for him. He thought of Man Ray as a great mentor and as a friend. And so this image of Catherine Deneuve in the studio, it was on the cover of the Sunday Times magazine, I believe, and it was June 1968. And so I said to Emily, how is this possible? Because Montebello said he met Man Ray in 1970, but here she is on the cover in 1968. And I felt like we have this like mystery in our hands, like Emily and I need to investigate this. Because for me, I mean, I always feel like, you know, there's so much more for us to know. But also, I love that this image comes right after the Tibetan hair ornaments, because in fact, these earrings, they also hook on to the back of the ears, right? So it's also not a traditional ear wire. And so I kind of love this, you know, contrast. And then of course, you know, Catherine Deneuve, just so stunning and sitting here. And then the lampshade, so pendants pending, you know, kind of a great play on words. And so it's after a Man Ray design for an actual lampshade, an abat-jour. And behind Catherine Deneuve, you can actually see that there is this sort of very like spirally sheet metal, you know, object hanging behind her. And so that's essentially what inspired these earrings. But we have a detective, like we have a mystery on our hands now. We need to become jewelry detectives and figure this out.
Well, I said to Bella, I wondered if they were a prototype, perhaps, you know, for something that was produced later, but we have some more research to do, which is so often the case with jewelry. I feel like there's many, many more stories to tell. And that's the thing about the museum collection. We have this information that's out there in our database that you can find on our website, but it's always being refined. And as you look back, you'll see things change slightly as the research changes or we learn more about something. So, you know, don't just assume that whatever's there is written in stone. It's always evolving.
Yeah, but these are incredible. And yeah,
we have a smaller pair too in the collection. So there's a smaller version of them.
Yeah.
The pair that we have belong to Joan Sonnabend, who you see here on the right wearing them. And I think even more than the first picture of them being worn, in this picture, you really get a sense of how extraordinarily large they are.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they look kind of difficult to wear in this picture, the way they're sitting between her shoulder and her ear. They don't look all that comfortable.
No, but also, I mean, first of all, not only is she wearing a fabulous pair of earrings, but she's also wearing a necklace by Ibram Lassaw. So, I mean,
that's also in the collection.
That's also, oh, is it? Oh my gosh. I mean, so, you know, Joan Sonnabend, who was another Boston legend, right? I mean, her show, Sculpture, it was Jewelry as Sculpture as Jewelry, was really groundbreaking when it opened in the 1970s. And she was sort of one of the earliest proponents of artist jewelry in America. And she actually brought a lot of Montebello's jewelry to the United States and sold it in her gallery, Sculpture to Wear at the Plaza in New York. But I mean, oh my God, her jewelry collection, must have been really superb. So I love this photograph as well.
Both of those pieces came to us from the Daphne Farrago collection. And so they didn't come directly from her to the MFA, but through this collector who some of you might know, that gave more than 600 examples of jewelry to the MFA's collection, ranging in date from the mid 20th century to 2006 when the donation was made.
Yeah. And I mean, the Daphne Farrago donation, I think, to me sort of has been sort of the cornerstone for a lot of us jewelry historians, because whenever there's, you know, a piece that we need to research, the first point is always for me to go to the Farrago collection and see if it's in there. So anyway, great photo.
Yes, this is a total change here to switch some costume jewelry by Coppola Topo, which is an Italian firm that's run by Lydia Coppola, who had been working in fashion jewelry as early as the 1940s. And what she found when she would go to Paris and see what was being made was that there were a lot of copies of fine jewelry being produced in glass and plastic. And she, you know, didn't really care for that. She was looking to figure out a way to create jewelry, to find jewelry that was more fun and more fashion forward. And so she created her own business. And here you see what she created during the 1960s. This example is plastic, although later she did use glass as well. You know, this is like nothing you would find in fine jewelry, but is so much of the time that it was created. And it's very likely that this bracelet and these huge earrings was created for Ken Scott. You see a Vogue image on the right of this great chiffon dress where the bracelets being held in the model's hands and the model's wearing the earrings. And we've found a number of other images of models wearing this type of jewelry, or maybe even this same design as well. You can imagine it with Pucci dresses, for example.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly.
Yeah. Fun. This is part of a large collection of costume jewelry that we acquired 2 years ago from the Canadian collector Carol Tannenbaum. So with that donation, we have this exceptional collection of costume jewelry that really ranges from the late 19th century to the 21st century.
So I actually wasn't familiar with Coppola and Topo before I saw this set, and I've been really interested in costume jewelry because I've never really done any research about it, but it's been really interesting to see how many, important costume jewelry designers, first of all, were women, which especially, sort of in the early part of the 20th century, or even, in the 50s and 60s, where we saw more women jewelers, there were certainly much more of them making costume jewelry. So that I think is super cool. But also, I didn't know this, but she was prominent enough that she was invited by Neiman Marcus to come to the United States and to sell her jewelry here in the US, where costume jewelry was so incredibly popular in the 60s. But to me, this is so Dolce Vita. And I love the colors because you and I, with our earrings today, are right. We're perfectly matched with this set here. And just sort of seeing it in Vogue is really wonderful.
Italian jewelers, even more so than the American jewelers who, had kind of developed costume jewelry during World War II. And early innovations in plastic, but the Italians were really good at partnering with fashion designers so that these things were shown with the latest fashions. And so the people would say I not only need that dress, but I need the bracelet and earrings that go with it. Yeah. The whole thing is so perfect together. So even though people were starting to shop and buy things individually, they were still, thinking more holistically.
Yeah. Smart, as they should be. Yeah. Well, I have to say that if I could just choose 2 pair of earrings to wear for the rest of my life, and only 2 pairs, it would be these 2. Hands down, this is the holy grail of jewelry, in my opinion. So I'm so excited to see them on my screen.
I know Art Smith's one of my favorites too. He's one of the early studio jewelers who's working in Greenwich Village, and these are his earrings on the left. And he had studied in Harlem with a woman named Winifred Mason, who even a few years ago, as I would mention her or Google her, not much would come up, but more and more is being found out about her. And there was a great program actually that Bella did during New York Jewelry Week that showed images of her work, which I hadn't seen before, which was really exciting to think about who Art Smith was learning from. He was a Black studio jeweler working in Harlem, and he talks about how inspired he was by Calder, like so many of his peers. He's inspired by Calder. And so you see these Calder earrings on the right, and in so many ways, these earrings are really simple, yet they're so extraordinary. But technically, they're not that... they're relatively easy to make compared to some of the other things that we've looked at with these cold connections and whatnot.
Yeah,
they're beautiful. And he in particular was really inspired by the body. And so you often see in the jewelry, these open spaces where you would allow skin or hair or something to come through instead of creating solid pieces that would have covered that up.
Yeah.
There's a great image on the next slide that actually shows him just playfully playing with wire and the way that he might have created something like this. And Calder created jewelry in the same way, often for friends and family, just playing around while chatting.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that those Calder earrings, those large ones were usually called winged victories. And I love there's something so powerful about thinking that you're wearing winged victories, right? But it's because of the way they frame the face. But also, as Peggy Guggenheim always famously said that, women wear his brooches, but she was the only one who would pull off his earrings. I wonder how comfortable they were because they're so large. Whereas these Art Smith earrings look like they're just so easy to wear, it's just such a pleasure to wear them. But this photo of him, I love. And Tony Greenbaum, who is the preeminent scholar and has done so much research on Greenwich Village and the jewelers who live there and work there, I should say, did a great tour, a virtual tour nonetheless, although I believe she's going to be doing it in person in New York soon. And so she showed, in 1950, she showed the space that Art Smith moved into. And so this happens to be that studio. And unfortunately, he actually had several spaces around Greenwich Village when he first opened, and because of racial persecution, he had to move several times. But this studio where this photo was taken of him in the 1950s, that really ended up being his space. So it's at 140 West 4th Street. And I actually never knew the address. And so I'm really excited also to go out and walk Greenwich Village and to find this space now. But I've heard a lot of stories of, from, women and men who were, in the 60s, were students and would make a trip to Greenwich Village every weekend to see these jewelers, Art Smith, Paulo Bell, Sam Kramer, working and like really having this experience of going in, and meeting them. And I just think, oh my God, like that must have been such an incredible time, like you're walking and you just see Art Smith, like making jewelry, out of wire, like how fabulous,
And for those of us that are in Boston, many of these jewelers would spend the summers in Provincetown. And so, they would spend most of the year in New York, but then in the summer they'd come to Provincetown where they had, they'd follow their clients and they'd have this whole other life there for the summer. That also was very much like Bella was saying, this community that was created around these shops.
Yeah. And I think of our contemporaries too, right? Who now, like you can, go and visit, bench jewelers and see what they're making. So, I mean, we have this nostalgia, but at the same time, we have so many great jewelers now that, we can sort of go and see their studios and have the same experience as well.
Right.
But, yeah.
Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
So these are one of the iconic looks from Marina B, who's actually Marina Bulgari, who had separated from her family firm in 1976 and went out on her own. And this was a design that she did in the 1980s that's based on airplane tires. And one of the things that I love about these earrings, this bottom element, which is Russian quartz, can be removed and you can swap it out with other drops. And so this pair that's in the MFA's collection has two other alternatives. You can put pink quartz on the bottom, or you can have orange quartz.
So,
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I really love that idea, which again, for us, I mean, these are from the 1980s, they're not so old, but also for us, this idea of, putting the creativity or the sort of the design into the hands of the wearer. Like, I love that you can swap them out and make them your own. I just think that's such a great idea that now we're always sort of talking about, but it's not a new concept. Clearly.
It goes back to the 1940s too, when you could see jewelry like this. You would buy one necklace, but it could come apart into bracelets and other types of things. And Bulgari was making jewels like this, and so Marina B would have been well aware of that type of jewelry that was being made and brought it here in a modern way to her own designs. And I love that you buy one pair of earrings, but you have I was going to say 3 options, but really more than that, because you could, of course, mix and match too. You don't have to have a matching set.
Yeah. Giving power to the wearer, essentially. It's really cool. And also what I didn't actually know, but she was known for this triangular cabochon cut in like her jewelry. That was kind of her trademark. And I was trying to see, like, with these earrings, like, is that, where is that triangular kind of cabochon? And I guess it is right here. I think this is it. Because I was really curious, like now, whenever you know something about someone, you're like, okay, I have to sort of like see that design element through their work. Like, where is it? So it's, I mean, these are beautiful earrings, and I was excited to see them in the collection as well.
And then our last pair are these really, I think, fierce earrings by Peter Chang that date to 1991. Peter Chang was based in Liverpool, and he was a graphic designer and sculptor who turns to jewelry in the 1980s. And these are really so much in line with all of the work that he was making, which was really inspired by pop art. He used a lot of plastics in his work. And he found such great freedom in being able to use cheap materials like plastic to do really creative things. And these are turned on their side, and so worn as a hoop, they would have kind of curled around so that the red part would have been in the back of the earring.
Yeah. Yeah, these are incredible. And they're, I mean, classic Peter Chang too, like the blue mosaic, the red and yellow color palette, which he used quite a lot. And also I think earrings for him were really rare because you see a lot of bracelets, right? But earrings is not something that you see as often. And so I thought, you know, we have to include them because they're really spectacular. And also, you know, now that I'm looking at them, they're also kind of reminding me of the work of Kusama, just because of the spots and the dots on top. But yeah, they're really beautiful. And I guess, do you think they're hollow on the inside? Like, I mean, I know they're plastic, but do you think they're hollow? So they're like lightweight? I'm always curious about that because I always envision putting everything on and like wearing all the jewelry.
I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'm more familiar with handling his bracelets than his earrings, but the bracelets are quite heavy. So I would think that these would be pretty heavy too.
Yeah. Well, they're beautiful. And again, the brilliant colors, it's, again, statement earrings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think about in Zoom, you know, now more than ever, we're being shown from the waist up, and, you know, what we're wearing in our ears is what people are seeing on the screen. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's a really timely subject and a great sale that the society's put together.
Yeah. So, you know, when we were putting these earrings, putting the presentation together, like one of the things I was asking is, and you sort of addressed this in the beginning, but you know, why aren't there sort of more earrings in museum collections overall? Because to me, it seems like they're sort of the most wearable. But there aren't as many earrings as there are other sort of types of jewelry. Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, they are certainly the most wearable. I think, you know, I'm not alone in having many more pairs of earrings in my jewelry box and other types of things, but I think they get worn a lot. You might lose one and not have a pair. But I also think that for many artists, it's not where they're doing their most creative work. Certainly that's not true across the board, but I think you tend to see in some of the larger brooches or necklaces that's where you see people making pieces that you might think go into a museum or that have the most storytelling qualities to them. So it's not usually the earrings that you think of.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I agree with you. I think the brooch always sort of lends itself. There's so much more surface area, right, to cover. And so therefore, there's so many more ways to be expressive. And earrings, I guess, too, you know, if we're wearing them more, and like you, I have more earrings in my collection than sort of any other type of jewelry. You're wearing them more, you're enjoying them more. Perhaps you're passing them down then, you know, to your loved ones. But I always think it's interesting where, you know, especially, I mean, I guess with more like costume jewelry and fashion jewelry and fine jewelry, perhaps there's plenty of earrings, but certainly with contemporary jewelry, you know, some of the sort of like the masters, you don't see as many earrings being produced. It's more of that brooch or a necklace, and bracelets too. You don't see that many bracelets normally.
I love bracelets, but they get really banged up. I think if you love bracelets and you wear them, you know, you tend to be kind of rough on them.
Yeah.
Emily and Bella, we do have one question about this pair of earrings. We are wondering, there seems to be a discrepancy in the angle of the posts on each one. And I'm wondering, you know, if you know anything about that, or if that might just be an oddity to this pair.
It's the photograph. It's the way that they're laying in the picture. So they're like a hoop almost. And so they'd be like curled around. And so the way that they're photographed laying on their side, it's a little bit of an illusion for how they would actually look.
Oh, well, there we go. Asked and answered. Are you two ready to take some questions, or do you want to, is there anything else that you'd like to cover here?
Ask away.
All right, great. So folks, if you do have any questions for Emily and Bella, we do have just a couple minutes left here in our conversation tonight. You're welcome to put them in the chat and I'm happy to ask, or of course you can give a wave and raise your hand. And I do see, hi Suzanne, looks like you've got our first question. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask away?
Well, when I saw the Man Ray earrings, I had to run upstairs and show you this, oops, how can I see it? This one, which is gold. It's a, you know, a very wearable size I just had to show it. I totally love, when I saw the Man Ray earrings, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, that's the giant size of my earrings. But actually, my big question was about the new materials, because I have I have one pair of 3D printed earrings, and I'm a textile designer, so I'm wondering if you ever see earrings with you know, textiles and metal and, you know, just mixing up the materials, especially you know, maybe Emily at the MFA, because you're crossing so many different media. So
Think of any examples of jewel earrings that we have that include textiles. Of course, there's examples that have textile techniques in them in metal, but I can't think of any. Bella, maybe you know of someone working today using textiles, but I can't think of anybody.
Whenever I'm put on the spot like this, I could never think of any names. but I'm sure later on something might come to me, and I'm happy to. No, but thank you so much also for showing your earrings. Oh, you're on.
I was given, I got it about 30 years ago, maybe 25, 30 years ago. It was a gift in Switzerland, from Switzerland. And I just love them. Unfortunately, I dropped one of them and somebody stepped on it. So I have to find somebody to reinvigorate it. Yeah. But yeah, I just think they're fantastic. I saw the Man Ray earrings and I go, oh, I want those. A little overscale, but thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne. And Jeffrey, I see you've got a hand up as well. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. I'm curious about one of the things that I see when I look at the international art jewelers, that there's more and more non-precious material and non-archival material showing up in the work of particularly younger artists who won't be constrained necessarily and can't afford sometimes to work in precious materials. Specifically with non-archival materials, how are you finding, how are museums responding to this? I asked this question of someone from the Tate Modern, and they said they were evolving to take that on, because I know that museums have to consider, you know, preserving these pieces over time, and certain materials don't lend themselves to that. So I just wondered, what would your response be to this trend? I mean, is it a trend that you notice also, or am I just anecdotally seeing
your work? I'm thinking about your work in the collection and the plastics, right, that are in the collection. And that's certainly something that our conservators are analyzing and looking at, and they're really interested in like which plastics are the most stable. And they, right before COVID, they had done some research into this, and they had found that in some cases, that some of our polymer is the least stable of any of the plastics in the collection. And so we are working to encapsulate those pieces in a way that they won't affect other things in the collection. But there's always ongoing research into not only how the materials are going to decompose over time, but how they're going to affect other things that they're stored near. And so for plastics in particular, thinking about plastics and metals and how those things will respond if they're in the same spaces is something that's really, that we're paying a lot of attention to and thinking a lot about.
Thank you. And I know that people are using even non-archival papers and bits and pieces of wood, and sometimes even foodstuffs that are, you know, or dried botanicals.
We have an incredible bracelet that some of Sienna Patty's artists put together for her anniversary of her gallery, and it's a charm bracelet, and all the artists made a charm, and one of the artists made a charm with silver and salt, and our conservators like, they were like, you're going to take this in, you're going to do what? We're supposed to do what with this? They were so worried about this, the salt and what that would do to the whole bracelet. Yeah, I think it is a challenge, especially for conservators. I don't envy them thinking about how they're going to maintain these things, you know, forever when they're such challenging materials.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? I'm just going to check the chat here to see if I've missed any. It does seem like there's a lot of interest in sort of the maintenance and care of earrings in the collection. Emily, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. I know we've talked about it a bit already.
There was a question I just saw about Jean Vendôme, if there was any pieces in the MFA's collection by Jean Vendôme.
We do have examples by Vendôme in the collection, yes. I don't think we have earrings though. I'm a little out of practice with the collection. I've only been in the MFA 5 times in the last year. I need to have an orientation, I think.
Can I come?
Excellent. Well, I think if that's it for the evening, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I don't know if Brigitte wants to say any quick closing remarks.
Just a general thank you. Thank you to Bella. Thank you to Emily. I think it was a fun talk. We're so grateful for you spending time with us and giving so generously of your expertise. This was a look behind the scenes, which is always exciting. And thank you very much. Also, thank you to all of the attendees to spend time with us this evening. I understand many of you have had a long day of work, and this is another Zoom call, but I hope we made it fun and we made it interesting, and that you will join us again when we do another Mix and Mingle. Thank you to Molly for keeping the good stuff coming, and I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.